Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back again with Mary Jane Pullam, of course, a big fan of the show. She's been with us for so long and learning so much about myofascial release. And she has her own company. She's the founder of Myofascial Wellness by Jane. And that's how you can find her on the big World Wide Web, myofascialwellnessbyjane.com. We're going to talk to her today about her work. And we also have some special guests that are joining with us, not just on the podcast, but on the Zoomcast as well. So Jane, let me have you start by saying hello.
Hey, everyone. Good to see everyone. Good to see you, Jill. I'm actually let me go ahead and introduce these lovely ladies who are also clients of mine and successful entrepreneurs in their own right. Colleen Felicki, she's a founder of Back to Earth Composting Crew, and her passion is redirecting food waste from the landfills back into the earth. And that's what she does. And she does it commercially, she does it residentially, and she's just an all-around awesome person. And then we have Andrea Judge, who she's internationally board certified lactation consultant. And she's been in private practice for 4 years, but she's been doing lactation consulting for 14 years or so. So I want to welcome these guys on, and they're going to share their experience of myofascial release. And I'm particularly also interested, Colleen brought her son to me. She has not actually had myofascial release yet, and Andrea has been to me and comes to me regularly. But let me just go into real quick. You want to just review for the people that are tuning in right now that don't know what myofascial release is. So what is fascia? So fascia, in 2018, there was an International Fascial Research Congress, and you may have heard it in the news. They discovered a new organ. What did they discover? They rediscovered actually fascia. Fascia initially, when we studied the body using cadavers, they were studying a system that was already dead, and they thought it was nothing more than packing material. And literally, that's what they were told. They were told to take it out, get rid of it in order to get to the important part of the body. And it wasn't until a hand surgeon, Dr. Guillaume Barteau from France, began to video the fascia live, that we actually had someone back up what John Barnes, who's the father of myofascial release, already knew for 50 years or so. So what is fascia? Think of it, it's our organ of form. It's what keeps us in our present shape. It's our container. Mm-hmm. So we think we have tight muscles. We don't have tight muscles. We have tight fascia. The fascia controls what's tight in the body, not the muscles. And think of a spider web running into and out of every single cell, connecting every single cell to the next cell and to cells all the way across the body. And much as if I were to pull, think of it as like a spider web or a fabric. If I were to pull here on my fascia, eventually that pull is going to go all the way over to the other shoulder. And that's what we see with injuries when I work on people. So it's also the internet of the body. It conducts messages at the speed of light, much faster than the nerves can conduct electrical impulses. It has, going back to organ of form, it has non-Newtonian properties, which means, and I've showed you this video before, the cornstarch and water video, where if you mix cornstarch and water, it's called oobleck. And if you go into that substance and try and sink in, you can sink in if you go gently and slowly. If you go with a hammer, it will bounce the hammer off of it. And that's what your fascia does. It keeps us in our present shape. If an incoming force comes in, it tightens up and it braces, and that's its job, right? If that happens too often, then you have injuries, and the fascia goes from being this nice, wonderful internet of the body, at its very base, a liquid crystalline filled tubercle conducting messages to something that's sticky, dehydrated, and shut down. And when it's shut down, it's shutting down all the cells that it's running through. And so they're not getting rid of their waste. They're not taking in nutrients. And that shutdown can cause 2,000 pounds of pressure per square inch on all these pain sensitive structures we have in our body, nerves included, right? Arteries, veins, everything. So there's no joint that was meant to withstand that kind of pressure for any length of time. There's no disc that was meant to withstand that. So lots of people think, why I just have bad knees, and my mom had bad knees. Well, I would like to know what set them up for that. Like what was shut down in their fascia that perhaps they inherited, or, life happened to them.
Yeah.
That caused that knee joint to eventually grind against itself so that no cartilage was left. And that's what fascia does when it's shut down. So why is there a special technique for it? Because just like the oobleck, that cornstarch and water, you can't go into it without going in gently. If I go into it hard, deep tissue, which is what I was taught back in school, it immediately braces because it's like danger. Force is coming in. We don't want this force. I'm going to brace. So you're working against yourself. And that's why massage for me never really got anyone beyond like just a temporary relief of their pain, as opposed to more of a permanent or a substantial relief of chronic and acute pain. So I think I just lost my train of thought.
It happens. It's okay.
So it requires a different technique that goes in gently, because I don't want to alert the fascia. I simply want to go in under the radar, right? I want to go in and gently release it. So what that looks like for me on my end is I look for what's not moving, what's hard, or what's shortened, or what's hot, because that means inflammation. And I gently go into it and I hold it. And right around 2-3 minutes or so, the skin, the fascia, the tissue begins to soften and sort of become like butter under my hands. And then after another 5 minutes or so, then it actually begins to move. And it may not have moved for decades. Wow. It can be shut down for decades. We can have injuries back at birth. And this is where Andrea's going to come in. We can have injuries back at birth. Being born's a trauma. Giving birth is certainly a trauma. That we, our bodies are young and we can compensate and we don't pay the price, but they accumulate every injury on top of every injury on top of every injury until we can no longer move. So that's why a special technique is needed to address it. And I just want to open it up and let them talk about
their experience, how they met, what's wrong, and tell.
Yeah.
Did you want to start with Colleen?
Sure. Yeah. I'm just fascinated by what Jane does.
Vice versa.
Former chiropractic assistant. And I have 2 children that have been under chiropractic. In fact, and I had a lactation consultant come in at birth for both of them because I nursed both of them. So familiar kind of with that as well. But I didn't realize, I knew about chiropractic, I knew about massage, but I like the whole fascia thing, like it totally makes sense to me. Yeah. And so the more people I talk to that are in chronic pain, the more I want to send them to you.
Thank you.
I did take my son to Jane. Gosh, it's been a couple months now, but he is a teenager and he's a hockey player and lifting weights. He must have done something and had just a nerve that was kind of bothering him on his elbow. And so, Jane was great because she explained everything up front with him. Now he's still like not quite sure what happened. Because it's a little foreign to him, but he's been under chiropractic care since he's been born, and I realized I guess recurring trauma. So we try to mitigate that, but but this was really helpful for him. He definitely saw a difference, whether or not he wants to admit it or not, but he hasn't been complaining about it. And so I know, and I watched her do what she was doing, and it totally makes sense to me. I feel like I'm one of those people that gets it because I don't know, because I have that experience, but maybe others get it not just because how she explains it so well. I think that's part of it, like her explaining it to the person who's receiving it. It makes the difference. And then if they know someone who's going through then they can explain it to them. It's just not like, oh, she's doing this and I don't know why, but she's, so it's great. I'm thrilled to know her. And thank you for having me today.
Thanks for being on here, Colleen. It's so cool. What did you do before? How long did he have that elbow issue? I'm trying to remember.
A number of months. I don't remember how many months, 3 or 4, maybe longer, but we took him to like an orthopedic, and and then they talked about surgery. So we don't want to go that route,
Right. Yeah. Right. And then lo and behold, you can't say it works for everybody. We never know who it's going to work for. Yeah. But when it works, it's like a miracle. It's like, why cut into, and I had a client say this, and I don't know if you can relate to this, Colleen, but don't you owe it to your body to find out if there is a less invasive way to correct what's going on?
Absolutely. 100%. There's so many risks involved. Number one, with surgery, then you heal, the time it takes, then the scar tissue, like for life.
Right. Right. And from my perspective, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
From my perspective, so now they still had the original problem that caused that fascia to shut down. Now there's another level of trauma on top of that, which is the scar tissue. There's twice, or if not more than twice as much to release at that point in time, because oftentimes it comes back. And I work on a lot of people who have carpal tunnel, who've had already carpal tunnel surgery. And it, not always, but I've seen it come back often enough that happens.
Can I jump in on something you said? I love the concept of you owe it to your body to figure out what's going on. And that's kind of the concept that I treat my my breastfeeding clients with. Is we know that feeding is one of the main goals of being a baby. They're supposed to double and triple their weight. And if they're not able to feed, there is a reason. Babies are not manipulative. They're not just trying to do the easier thing. They are designed, and they have all of these reflexes that support feeding. So if they're not doing it, don't we owe it to the baby to figure out why? Unfortunately, in our more traditional Western medicine, they've never learned about fascia. They've never learned about infant feeding, and they've never learned about how feeding is an entire body experience for babies. So their goal is to make sure that the baby's just growing.
Yeah.
And that can often be done with artificial feeding, but that's usually not the goal. That's usually not how the parents want to be feeding. So what we've learned over time, and as we know, it takes change to change a big system. So those of us who are working intensely with these clients are a little bit ahead of our overall medical system in understanding this. And what we see is that if babies are tight in their hips, they can't move their lips. They need to be loose all over. And
interesting.
So, and you might hear, if you know anything about like infant feeding, one of the big things right now is babies that are tongue-tied. So there's now becoming a recognition that if their tongue is kind of glued to the floor of their mouth and doesn't move well, that it impacts feeding. They either don't take enough, they tire out, they cause mom pain, and all kinds of problems can happen. Well, what do you think is holding down that tongue? It's called a frenulum, which is actually part of the fascial system.
Right.
So our Western medicine has started recognizing this, and their solution is to cut that piece of frenulum, which for some people really does cause an immediate if it's really close to the tip of the tongue and that tongue can't lift at all, occasionally we do see, oh my gosh, it feels so much better. But now a lot of pediatric dentists are lasering pretty deep into that frenulum, and it still wasn't helping. And what we figured out is it's only going to help if we're removing that tension from the rest of the body.
Right.
So in a short period of time, the pediatric dentists have kind of become the experts in how to do a frenotomy, but they've also very quickly pivoted to realizing that that cut alone is not what's going to fix this. So I now have pediatric dentists who will refuse to do the procedure until the parents and the family are working with some sort of body work, such as myofascial release, and a lactation consultant to support the whole process.
That's fantastic.
That's amazing. And so interestingly enough, I think I mentioned John Barnes, but he founded this technique merely out of desperation, because he's in his 80s now and still teaches. He had a weightlifting injury. He was young, and we're young, we think we could do anything, and he didn't have a spotter as he was weightlifting, and he had quite a bit of weight, lost his balance, and thought he would just roll. And that doesn't work, obviously, with weight on you. So into his 20s and 30s, he's now running PT clinics and hiring the best people with the latest techniques, and no one can give him relief for longer than it takes for him to get to the parking lot. So on your note, though, Andrea, there is a guy, I believe his name is Barry Gillespie. He was a dentist. You know of him, right?
Yep.
So he left the dentistry profession and he took classes from John Barnes. And then he went into doing that because he decided to stop this issue way before it became a big deal with orthodontics and later problems and not having enough room in your mouth and so forth. He wanted to stop it when they were babies. So he teaches now his own classes, which are based on John Barnes classes. So
he merges the craniosacral therapy technique with the myofascial technique. He calls it craniofascial.
Craniofascial. Okay. Oh, interesting. I didn't know what it was called. Okay.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have taken his classes. And then also there's a lot of therapists, myofascial release therapists, who specialize in babies and working with them. It's an entirely different way of working. You have to do a lot less of the holding and a lot more of what we call unwinding, which is sort of unwinding and rocking and letting them move however they want to move. And that's them getting out all that trauma that's in there. It's as if when we were traumatized, we left part of ourself in positions in space in which we got traumatized. So sometimes we need to revisit those positions in space. And then also when the fascia shuts down, whatever chemical components that were our emotions at the time, they're locked in there too. So all of that needs to come out. And sometimes people will spontaneously move, especially babies. And so the technique with babies is a lot more what we call rebounding and unwinding, and a little bit of the holding.
Babies are amazing. They want to be in alignment. So if you let them move and put them in a position, like a lot of babies have really kind of cranked up necks. So they can't turn to one side or the other. And if they continue that for a couple months, they end up with the diagnosis of something called torticollis, which is like a head tilt. And everyone thinks it just kind of arose or that they were born with it, but often it's because they were born this way, and then they just continued holding that position. So all of the fascia and the muscles kind of got conditioned to do that. So one of the things that I teach parents to do is to kind of hold their baby, supporting their hips and their shoulder, and let their head tilt back. And they will actually move to the side that they don't normally move to. And they make these funny noises. They're like, it's a different kind of cry. It's a relief.
I love it.
Cry. And as they're doing it, I see their tongue moving more and more and more. They're like working into that stressed. So
Oh.
they're not supposed to be crying when they do it. They do this little like,
Aw.
but it's
Yes.
not, they're not supposed to be wailing when they do it. So just movement works. And the more that I've learned about the fascial system, the more I realize that this is what they're working with innately.
That's amazing. Go ahead.
But we have such a, our babies are often very contained. They're in a lot of containers. They're in swings, they're in car seats, they're swaddled for sleep, which goes against like this idea of movement. We have the back to sleep campaign because right now our data tells us that is safer, but we're doing all kinds of things that are restricting babies while they're sleeping because they really are not meant to sleep on, like they really want to sleep on somebody's chest on their belly. So we have to kind of balance the public health data we have on sleep by giving them lots of opportunity to move during the day or to be skin to skin with mom or in an upright carry position where they have a little bit of mobility.
That makes so
they
much
can
sense.
unwind.
Yes, that makes so much sense. So the John Barnes talks about channel 5 and channel 3, and it's more like a state of mind. Channel 5 being the talkative, the monkey mind, the thing that gets us to our appointments on time, the thing that helps us organize. But it's limited in what it can do. And there's also channel 3, and channel 3 is connected to the wisdom of the ages, right? It's connected to unlimited wisdom. And babies are naturally, because they haven't learned how to be in channel 5, they're naturally in channel 3. So it makes absolute sense to me that you give them enough room, they're going to actually start to move in ways that their body needs to move because they're already listening to it. It's right there. There's no need to overcome channel 5. So
in a perfect world, everybody would have access to hands-on professional myofascial work from the beginning, but because it's not covered by insurance, most of my clients are not getting full pay or pay at all when they're home. So we've learned a lot of techniques to try and help parents kind of utilize these techniques on their own. If the baby gets stuck, that's when we refer to chiropractic or myofascial, or some physical therapists are actually, I have a friend who's a physical therapist who works with babies, and she told me in her training, they didn't learn anything about fascia. So when I was working with her and her babies, she looked at me like I was nuts because it didn't jive with what she had learned in PT school. But she has since dug into the literature and become an expert. And now everything she does is fascial related.
wow.
So change can happen.
Yeah.
It's just slow.
Yes, it is slow. But
And I just don't like that. So it's not covered by insurance for most people. I don't understand that concept. When and how? Is there a movement going where, I mean, all of your healthcare providers are getting together to try to push for this? Because it should be. That's such a shame.
Well, I mean, from my own profession, when I became a lactation consultant, there was no insurance coverage. Now, asterisk, there is for people who have private insurance. So we did band together, and lactation coverage is included in the Affordable Care Act under preventive health. So certain insurances locally, one pays everything. Anytime I see a client, I get reimbursed at a fair amount. One says they do and doesn't fully live up to what they're saying. And then others get away with not paying for it. So has there been progress? Yes. Are we where we need to be? No. But I do think that the bodywork community and physical might even benefit to band together with physical therapy.
Absolutely.
To really work on figuring out how do we get to the table at the insurance companies to recognize that this is going to save you money in the future.
Absolutely.
If you can unwind this baby at birth and they don't need a helmet and they don't need, all these future things, and they don't need artificial feeding and they don't have all the ear infections, and this saves money.
Yeah.
Exactly. All the secondary conditions that happen when the fascia shut down, that costs insurance companies a lot of money. And you're right, preventing that.
But it will take a concerted effort and time to make that happen. But it's definitely, I mean, it's my practice exists because insurance is now a viable option for many of my clients.
Mhm.
Yeah, and my practice as a massage therapist, I cannot,
Mhm.
would not be able to take insurance. It's just not the way it's done. But yet I have a steady stream of people coming in because they've tried everything else. They've
Right.
tried
Yeah.
everything.
Mhm.
They see the
Uh,
value. They see the value in it. It's
right. And
yeah.
let me just share about this one particular woman who I saw yesterday. I tried to get her to come on, but she doesn't like Zoom. And anyway, she is on disability and has been on disability for months because
Mhm.
she can't lift her arm above here, and she has shooting pains throughout her entire body. And she could now actually move her shoulders. And I would say maybe in another 3 sessions, she'll be back to work. So she was at the point where she was considering, do I leave this job?
Mhm.
It pays really well. Or do I, try and find another way to fix it? And so that's what she tried to do, or that's what she chose to do, is to find another way to fix it. Do we have any time for Andrea to talk about the
Yeah, we got
mother's
4 minutes left. Yeah, we have time.
to talk about how fascia also determines whether or not a mother's milk can
Mm.
come.
Wow.
So this was fascinating because when I first went, we were working on some like hip, or not hip, some tightness in my ribs.
When you came to me, yeah.
When I came to you.
Yeah,
And Jane told me that they have a saying that if you have it, we'll pull it. And so she kept telling me to pull on my nipples. And I was like, it's not doing anything. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then after a session, I started doing it because this is what I do for a living.
Yeah.
Nipples are no big deal.
Yep.
And I just started kind of playing with it. And sure enough, after some work had been done, when I would, kind of manipulate the nipple and pull it, I would feel all kinds of
Wow.
release happening. And some of it was like shooting, tingling pain, which is exactly what I hear from my moms. So it kind of a light bulb went off that I bet that a lot of unidentified nipple or breast or nipple pain that we can't find the reason for it. There's not a baby reason. I think that there's probably a fascial component to a lot of the breast pain that lactating parents are feeling.
And that leads into this. There is no scan, MRI, CAT scan, or otherwise, that will show what is tight in your fascia. It'll appear usually as nothing's wrong. You're pretty good. Your discs are good. There's no restriction. You're fine. But yet the problem persists. And so
that leads me to a question. I have a question. Like, so if we're not taking care of this throughout our life, now, and the cells aren't getting the nutrients they need if they're locked up, how is this affecting our health in other ways? Not just like pain in the body, but like cancer and autoimmune illnesses and things like that.
So in ways we probably don't even realize yet, but I know of 2 therapists who had breast cancer. Both used myofascial release solely. Both were hoping to get rid of the tumor completely. One did, the other one shrunk it to about 1/8 the size.
Wow.
So you still needed to get it taken out. But now what she did was she skipped by the chemo that would have poured all those chemicals into her body.
Sure.
She did it by opening up the fascia, because when the fascia is locked down, that's when your body can create these walls that nothing can penetrate, right? And that's where things go wrong in your cells. That's where growth can go, become out of control. There's nothing to check it. So also learning disabilities with children. They've found that it works really well with that. And like, you name it, things you wouldn't even think about.
Lyme disease. I know that you had mentioned Lyme disease.
Lyme disease. So anything that can, when the fascia shuts down, it's not just muscles, it's organs as well. So, or organs that, are responsible for immunity, they get shut down. So if you just take the pressure off the system, your body knows how to heal.
Yeah.
We just need the pressure off our system. So that's such a good question. Yeah, because it goes so far beyond muscles, tendons, ligaments, or any like that. It goes throughout the entire brain, the body, every organ. Bone is ossified fascia.
Oh, wow.
Wait,
Yeah.
bone is ossified. Oh, really? Man, no, know that. Learn something new. Wow, this is great.
Well, from our
Yes,
perspective.
I know.
yes,
I
that's what-
see. And I apologize, ladies, but we're out of time.
Thank
30
you
minutes
so
is up.
much.
Would you mind just, of course, telling us how we can reach out to you? And thank you both for sharing your stories as well.
Yeah, I want to thank them too. Thank you so much. So if you Google me, Google Wellness by Jane in Philadelphia. My website is myofascialwellnessbyjane.com. My phone number is 843-814-8642. That is a Charleston number, but I am located in Philadelphia, just north of Philadelphia in Jenkintown. Email is marythejane2010@gmail.com.
Perfect. And do you girls want to share your contact information as well? It's up to you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. My name again is Andrea Judge, and I can be found at AndreaJudgeIBCLC.com. But if you're in the local area and you just searched for lactation consultants, I should pop up. And you can reach me at 215-266-1076.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
Colleen.
And Colleen Felicki, Back to Earth Compost Crew, backtoearthcompost.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and our phone number is 610-470-4680. If you search us on Google, everything should pop up as well. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, ladies. Oh, go ahead. Go, Jen.
Phone number for people who are not in the Philadelphia area. You can
Yep.
find a therapist near you, myofascialrelease.com. Go over the top of the page on the right, find a therapist, and find someone near you.
Perfect. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Jill.
We'll be in touch. And if I don't speak, I guess happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And we'll talk soon. Okay.
It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.